Welcome back, everyone, to Getting in a College Coach Conversation. We are talking all things summer, and I think somewhere in the back of my mind, my hope is that in these conversations, we are somehow willing it to come. Um, but up here in Maine, it probably will not arrive until, I don't know, June. So I've got a little ways to go. But joining me for our final segment on things that students can be doing with their summers, we just talked a lot about summer jobs, but there are a wide variety of things people can do, is my colleague Michael Yager. He's a former admissions officer at Wheaton and St. Lawrence colleges. He's also a former school counselor at the Baldwin School of Puerto Rico and Fort Worth Country Day. So he is worked with students, seen it in applications, but then also talked to students about what they're going to do with their summers for a good long while now, makes him the perfect expert for this. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how you doing?
Good,
Maybe
thanks.
July is safe in Maine for summer, probably.
Yeah, I know. Please, thank you. I'm holding out hope for June, but you're right. It's probably more like July. Um, all right. Well, my first question for you is a pretty basic one, and that is, what do colleges want to see students doing with their summer?
Yeah, great question. Something is like the best
Yes.
answer, probably. And students will have a ton of options, and sometimes that can be part of the problem is just looking out there and seeing like, all right, what the heck do I do with my summer? And there are a lot of things. Students can do something that's more structured, that's prepackaged. Think of your academic program where you're gone for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, or your sports camp where you have 2 weeks with your team camp, or maybe you have an individual, your like band camps. There are a lot of things out there that students can just grab onto and have that experience. Employment, the
Yeah.
old man in me says like, go get a job. I can hear my dad say that when when it
Yep.
approached time, as we were getting close to the summer, go get a job. And that's certainly an option, probably more for the older students. Students that are rising ninth graders, rising 10th graders, they may not have that luxury depending on their state laws or just the opportunity to do it time wise. So going out, finding employment, finding an internship, those are great opportunities. Volunteering is another big thing, in particular for younger students, that may not have access to some of these programs because of age restrictions or employment. Like going out and volunteering in their community is a great way to not only get involved, but also to see, maybe you're testing out professional interests. You get involved in volunteering for something that's related to the medical field because you feel like that may be a strength for you. So there's a lot of great things that you can do locally in your community, or students that create their own opportunity. And this is something that I talk to my students as a high school counselor about. Maybe they had some ideas of what they wanted to do, and I said, why don't you just create a proposal, ask your parents for the money or ask a business for the money, like get creative here and see if you can fund this experience if it is going to cost a whole lot of money.
Hmm. Love it. I mean, there are really so many things students can do. And I'm with you on the getting a job front. And by now, our listeners are like, okay, we get it, Beth. You think a job is really valuable because I just spent a whole segment talking about how valuable I think it is. But putting the jobs, strictly jobs, to the side, how do you go about figuring out who you are, right? What's the best option for you? And if, a lot of ninth graders, 10th graders are sort of like, I don't know what I want to do with my summer. I think I'd like to go to the beach, or I'd like to sit in my basement and play more video games. As a parent, I know that's something I hear from parents. So what's your advice on figuring out what else a student can do
Yeah,
that would be
it's a
right
great
for them? Yeah,
It's a
sorry.
great question. And right now is the perfect time to engage with that student and not waiting until we get to, the end of the school year when they have APs and they may have a lot of things going on, final exams, things that they're closing out for the year. The big part of summer for me has always been meeting with students and really assessing like, what is your story right now? Where are your strengths? Where are areas that you want to improve? What are things that you're curious about? Sitting down and doing a really good self-assessment at this point in March before you have to make potentially decisions or deposits on what you're doing with the summer is critical. When you get to the place of a college application, you're really telling your story. And so what do you want it to be a part of? That you're, an incredible intellectual and that you've attended all these different academic programs and you have research that you want to demonstrate through your college application? Is it that you're, an incredible leader and that you've demonstrated that through athletics? Maybe summer is an opportunity now to do a leadership program and build those skills so you can become a captain of that team, or so you can take on a new role when you come back to school. And so in the spring, it's a really great time to do a lot of self-assessment and goal setting. And I think students that are able to do that, you may have multiple options over the summer. So you don't have to pick just one prepackaged program. You may be doing, test prep, you may be doing a structured program, and you may be working a part-time job on the evenings and on the weekends. And so, but knowing which areas you want to improve and how you want to tell your story is going to be an important part of the process for students right now.
Yeah. And I want to second the idea of, areas you're looking to improve or maybe learn more about. I will have students sometimes come to me, oh, I want to take a class. In what? Well, I don't care, but I thought it would be really cool to take a class at Brown or a class at Cornell or, name the very well-known name brand institution. And, my response there is always, well, we already know how you do school. So what else? And while I'm definitely not against those programs, although they do tend to be really pricey, you should be exploring something rather than simply, I want to take a class and show that I can do well in this class at this school, right? So I love the programs. One of the things I'm a big fan of, future engineers, do some type of an engineering exploration program because you might discover, oh, I'm good at math and science, but this engineering stuff, not for me. Good to discover that before you wind up in an engineering program in college. Or you are showcasing to a school, hey, I'm really good in math and science, and I know what I'm getting myself into with engineering, so you can write about it if they ask you kind of why engineering, but also they can see from this summer program you've done that you know what you're getting yourself into. And as when I used to read files at Penn, it certainly wasn't a requirement, but when I saw it, I knew, ooh, this is a student who really does like engineering, and because they're talking about it in a really educated way, like they know what they're getting themselves into, or even if they're not, I can see that they do know that because they've done this program. So,
I mean, there's definitely value in the failure there too. Like I had a student who
yes,
did an engineering program. That's what they had been told by, their friends, peers, parents, that you're going to be a great engineer. And so they signed up for a summer program because that's not a typical class that's offered at your school. And
right,
they came back and they told me, I'm interested in architecture. Like I
yeah,
just loved the buildings when I was there. It was like an amazing experience, but I don't want to do engineering. And
right.
so that's a great pivot because, with a lot of architecture programs, there potentially could be a need for portfolio. And so now we could build out his next summer. And because he had crossed engineering off the list, I think that was the value for him.
Yes, and I love that too, that there's so much value in knowing what you don't want in as much as it helps you get a little bit closer to what you might want. And like you said, he wasn't so focused on engineering, so he could explore a different area and also just not be like, well, I'm applying to engineering programs. Again, I'm always drawing on my own personal experiences, but my brother, good at math and science, applied to be an engineer, transferred out after 2 years of the engineering program into a different program. And I think this happens to a lot of students. So people are going to tell you that you're going to love something and be good at it. Try it out and test that hypothesis. And then you can say whether you actually love it. And even if you are good at it, if you hate it, then what good does that do you? Um, what about, I think we hear a lot and think a lot about these programs as being sort of really selective, especially again when my students are thinking about, oh, I want to do this program at this name brand institution and it's at this name brand institution, therefore it's super selective. And they're a little upset to learn sometimes anyway that it's not actually that selective. It's
Right.
you can afford it and you are willing to apply and welcome aboard, right? So, but what's your take on summer programs and how selective they are and how, are there any that are all that selective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. There are some that are selective programs. Usually they will try to share that information with you up front and to let
Mhm.
you know. Usually those ones tend to have earlier application deadlines, so you're looking into March, potentially even earlier than that depending on the program. But the vast majority are not necessarily selective. They may fill, so they may put out a date that says if you deposit by this deadline, we'll reserve your space in the program, or we'll have space until it's filled. And so it may create that perception that it's a little bit more selective than it is.
Mhm.
But a lot of these programs are simply there for the experience, and that's when I talk to students. You shouldn't be really thinking about summer as I need to get into this selective program. It should be about your personal growth and what are you going to get out of this program. And if that matches up with a super selective program and you feel like it's a great opportunity, awesome, go for it. And if you don't get it, there's going to be plenty of other opportunities that you can take advantage of over the summer. But there aren't a ton of those programs that where you really need to feel the need to complete everything early and get everything out the door. There's a lot of other places that students can land and get a great experience.
Yeah, I think that's super accurate. And what about because we've been talking about some of these programs that are expensive. What if, I'm a parent, I'm listening, I don't have the money to pay for a summer program. Is that going to put my student at a disadvantage when it comes time to apply to college?
Yeah, I mean, I heard this year for the first time 20 grand for a summer program,
Ooh,
which
wow.
similar
That's
response to what I had.
a lot of
Um,
money.
yeah, I mean, it's a ton of money. And obviously, from a college standpoint, there's not an expectation that students and families are writing that check every year, especially with what the tuition and fees are going to be at most places. And so really schools value pretty much anything that you do. If you have to be a student that's maybe nannying for your cousins for the entire summer, that's a lot of work working with little kids. I mean, that says
Mm-hmm.
something to an admission office. That tells a story that you have developed patience, that you are willing to work with children, that you're probably a good educator to some degree. If nothing else, that you have immense patience, and that you're also working and saving money potentially. You're helping the family out. If it's a non-paid gig, that also tells an admission office something, that you have that commitment to your family and you have that responsibility. So there are a lot of things that students can do. Obviously, there are paid jobs, there are unpaid internships, and so the dollar figure from an admission standpoint really doesn't have any impact on their decision making.
Yeah, and if anything, I think, you know, having the money to pay for an expensive program, almost it's sort of like, okay, great, your parents paid for this for you. Some of those opportunities that you find for yourself, or where you're supporting someone in your family by taking, they don't have to pay for a babysitter because you're doing that for your younger siblings, for example. That's going to shine a little brighter, in my opinion, than some of these really expensive, fancy programs that people do.
Yeah, they tend to
So,
be more interesting, at least. And as you're
yes.
building your own story, you can say that I went to a program, and you really have to work to make that interesting. Like, what did you learn? Like, who did you interact with? Did you pick up something else from the program that now you're applying to your high school experience? But some of the more individual ones, I think that helps the student build their narrative a lot easier.
Yeah. So we have a few minutes left, and I know that you went to our team and found some good stories about what are some summer things that students did that were, just some good examples to share with our listeners.
I mean, obviously the rock picking one stuck out
Yes,
for me. if,
that was
if
a
you're
good one.
if you're spending your summer going down the rows of fields picking up rocks so equipment doesn't get damaged, like that demonstrates like hard work. Obviously, you're probably working on your maybe fitness for an athletic program or something that you're gearing up for. But I found that to be interesting, unique. I think the story of a student who's working a campaign, and the campaign has decided to move because they're done with that particular region. The student hung on and grabbed 10 of his friends that were also working on the campaign, and they fundraised for several weeks so they could move on to the next campaign stop. That tells a story that this kid is, committed to this particular campaign, about the issues within the campaign, and I found that, pretty compelling. Um, I had a personal story. I had a student who was the family owned a Christmas tree farm, and so over the summer, that's when they planted Christmas trees, and then they would, take care of them and watch them grow, and then people would come and cut them down in the winter. And so his perspective was very different as far as that whole process. And so I
Hmm.
think that spun a really good narrative and told a good story about him and family, and there's a lot of values that you can grab out of that. So those are some of the ones that I thought from the group that were, more interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think it's a good example of all the different things that you could do with your summer, all of them valuable in their own way. Really quickly, because we have about literally 1 minute, what are some resources, some people that students should talk to? I think we've mentioned a couple, but any additional advice you would have about where to find opportunities?
Yeah, school counselors, great resource for anything local. That's an opportunity that they might already know, and they may know you're a good fit for it. So definitely, connecting with your school counselor. Volunteer Match is a great website that if, wherever a student is nationwide, they can go in. If they're looking for a quick experience or a longer one, they can go in and find that information there. Obviously, your personal networks, families, friends, coaches, teachers, administrators, anyone that's connected to you, they want to help you out. And so if there is an experience that they feel like matches your interests and helps build your story, they're going to work towards that. And then obviously local, online, colleges, campus programs that are going to connect with students. Those would all be great opportunities for kids.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. And thanks to all my guests. Next week, Sally is hosting, and we're going to be focusing the entire show around community college, from one person's experience to financial benefits, academic opportunities. And don't forget, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And we are here every Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern and 1 p.m. Pacific.